Welcome everyone to Module 3 of our UX Design class, and this week we are talking about information architecture. So last week we were really discussing more of kind of the fun elements of design in terms of typography and color and our design principles and the psychology behind decisions that we make. And what users find themselves drawn to, just sort of the aesthetics of things. And there's a lot of different layers to information architecture, and in this class we'll only be kind of addressing this more superficial or front end layer of information architecture, where it's like, how do we organize elements on a page? How do we navigate people through an app or a website? How do we communicate? How do we communicate through design? The discoverability of our design. How do we make sense of it? And that's really what we're going to discuss this week. So as we go through the content, it is a long module, and so do get into it early. And maybe one of the things to note is that there is group activity or group work on our project as you go. And so really getting started right away, and even if that means bopping past all of this individual learning and work that you're going to do down to the last third of this content where you're going to be working in your groups, just whatever works best for your schedule. All right, so we're going to talk about how latch principles, how users interact with information, categorically speaking. You're going to do a little mini activity with that. Then we'll move into some other concepts like mental models and cognitive overload or cognitive load, paradox of choice, banner blindness, sort of a little bit of F pattern, not as much as you would cover in UX research. And then once we get past all of those very fundamental concepts of information discoverability and sort of our existing mental models and how humans in general approach discovering and using and working with information, then we're actually going to be looking at example websites. So there's one particular website called Bellroy that I will be going through and analyzing, kind of breaking it down for you guys in terms of their navigation. They've won awards for their navigation. We'll look at some additional examples, and then we'll get into kind of different kinds of navigation bars, in particular primary and secondary navigation. And then after we get past all of that and looking at footers, then we're going to analyze a couple different websites. Well, you'll watch me analyze two different websites, Amazon, Bellroy, and then we'll talk a little bit about navigation specific to apps, read about the hamburger menu, refresher of A/B testing. I think a lot of you are familiar with it, but just in case, because we'll be reviewing some A/B testing. And then you're actually going to be, I'm going to walk you through several different example websites, and we're going to look at their navigation and how you discover information through their primary navigation options, like through BBC, a couple different real estate websites. And then you're actually going to be analyzing websites. So you'll go and you'll pick a website off of this link here, and then you're going to analyze it for one of your activities this week. And then you're going to share something that you found to be really confusing to use, a confusing interface, to the discussion board with your peers and responding to a couple. So if you could get into that early, that'd be great. I did have an earlier due date in the last module for the discussion board, and I believe I did not do that this time just because we've got this client interview coming up, so you do have a little bit of extra time to reply to people, but if you can get in there early. And then just a quick overview of sitemaps and user flows. A lot of this, again, is going to be the user flow stuff from research, so just like a quick overview of that. And then a quick preview of wireframes. I just introduced them. We will talk about them more in a future module as you actually start creating them. And I talk about low and high fidelity wireframes, or low and high fidelity prototypes are working wireframes. We'll get into all that later, but it's good to kind of give you a little bit now in case you're totally new to wireframing and prototyping.